Nobody taught my grandmother how to stretch a pot of soup across 5 days. She figured it out on her own, feeding 6 children on a coal miner's pay in eastern Kentucky. By the end of the 1930s, she could open a bare cupboard and make the kitchen smell like a real Sunday dinner. She never wrote any of it down. One secret on this list turned a 5-cent box of crackers into something guests swore was real apple pie. And the one at number 14 kept a single pot of soup alive on the stove for an entire winter. These were not clever tricks from a cookbook. These were survival skills, passed down by women who had almost nothing and still fed everyone at the table. So hit subscribe and pull up a chair, because here are 25 forgotten Depression-era cooking secrets every senior should know. Number 25. Stretching a whole lunch out of one raw onion. There was no deli meat in the house, no cheese. There was bread, a raw onion, and whatever fat you had saved. That was the whole trick. You sliced the onion thin, spread a little lard or bacon grease on the bread, laid the slices down, and hit it with salt and pepper. That was lunch. In parts of the Midwest and the Ozarks during the early 1930s, children carried onion sandwiches to school. Not because anybody chose it, but because it was all the budget allowed. The secret was the onion itself. It was cheap, it lasted in the root cellar for months, and it filled you up faster than an empty stomach could argue with. Some families added a smear of mustard if they had it. Most did not. Number 24. Stretching coffee with roasted chicory root. When real coffee got expensive, people in the South already knew what to do. They roasted chicory root, ground it fine, and mixed it half and half with whatever coffee they had left. In New Orleans, this was not even a Depression-era invention. It went back to the Civil War, when Union blockades cut off the coffee supply. The flavor was darker, earthier, a little more bitter if you used too much, but it made a quarter pound last twice as long, and most people came to prefer the taste. My grandmother kept a jar of roasted chicory next to her coffee can for years after the hard times ended. She never saw a reason to stop stretching what already tasted good. Before I go further, for the folks who want more of this, the recipes and kitchen secrets I keep coming back to on this channel, I have gathered them in the Vintage Recipe Guide at my website, vintagelifestyleusa.com. I will not bring it up again in this video. If you want it, it is there. Now, back to the list. Number 23. Making real bread with nothing but cornmeal and boiling water. No flour, no eggs, no milk, no baking powder. Just cornmeal, salt, and boiling water. And people called it hot water cornbread. You mixed it into a stiff batter, shaped it by hand, and fried it in a hot skillet with bacon grease until both sides turned golden and crisp. It came out tasting like more than it had any right to. In Alabama, Mississippi, and across the rural South, this was what you made when you had run out of everything except what the land grew. Corn was easy. Water was free. The grease was whatever you had saved from the last piece of pork. People still make it exactly this way today. The recipe never changed because it never needed to. Number 22. Bread pudding from stale bread. Nobody threw bread away during the Depression. When a loaf went hard, you tore it into pieces, soaked it in whatever milk you had, added an egg if you could spare one, a spoonful of sugar, and a pinch of cinnamon or nutmeg. You baked it low and slow until it set up soft and almost custard-like in the center. What came out turned something most people today would toss straight in the trash into a warm dessert that filled the whole kitchen with the smell of Sunday morning. Families across the Ozarks and the Upper South made this every week with the bread ends and heels nobody wanted at the regular table. It was one of those Depression-era inventions that honestly tasted better for being made from almost nothing. The worse the bread, the better the pudding soaked up the milk and spice. Number 21. Picking dandelion greens straight from the yard. Before the lawn care industry convinced everyone that dandelions were weeds, people ate them. During the Depression, dandelion greens were free salad growing right outside the door. You picked the young leaves in early spring before they turned bitter, washed them, and dressed them with a splash of vinegar and hot bacon grease. In Appalachia, some families wilted the greens in a hot skillet with salt pork and a little garlic. The flavor was sharp and peppery, and the leaves held more vitamins than the iceberg lettuce that eventually replaced them in grocery stores. The yard was not a lawn. It was a garden nobody had to plant. Today, restaurants charge $15 for a dandelion salad and call it farm to table. Your grandmother just called it supper. The Depression did not come with a cookbook. It came with hunger, and the kitchen was where you answered it. Every secret on this list came from the same place: a woman standing over a stove with less than she needed and more people to feed than she planned for. Nobody wrote these methods down because nobody thought of them as methods. They were just what you did. You saved the grease because buying more was out of the question. You stretched the coffee because the next can was 2 paychecks away. You boiled the bones because waste was a luxury no family could afford. These were quiet decisions, repeated every morning and passed on not by instruction but by example. A daughter watched her mother. That was the whole curriculum. Number 20. Using potato water for baking. When you boiled potatoes, you did not pour the water down the drain. That starchy, cloudy liquid went straight into your next batch of bread or biscuits. The starch gave the yeast something extra to feed on, helped the dough rise higher, and made the finished bread softer than plain water ever could. In German and Irish immigrant households across Pennsylvania and Ohio, potato water bread was common practice long before the Depression. The hard times just made everyone else pick up the habit. The bread came out with a slight golden color and a faint sweetness that plain flour and tap water could not produce. 1 pot of water served 2 meals. That was the whole philosophy of Depression-era cooking in a single habit. Number 19. The Ritz cracker mock apple pie. This is one of the strangest and most famous cooking secrets from the Depression. And the thing is, it actually works. You broke a sleeve of Ritz crackers into rough pieces, layered them into a pie crust with sugar, cinnamon, cream of tartar, lemon juice, and a few pats of butter. You poured hot water over the whole thing, sealed the top crust, and baked it. What came out tasted so close to apple pie that people who did not know what was inside could not tell the difference. The science was simple. The buttery salt of the crackers combined with cinnamon and the citric acid from the lemon created a flavor profile that the tongue read as baked apple. The texture of the softened crackers even mimicked the slight bite of a cooked apple slice. Nabisco printed the recipe on the back of the Ritz box in the mid-1930s, and it stayed there for decades. During the worst years of the Depression, fresh apples could be hard to find depending on the season and where you lived, but a box of crackers cost a nickel. A lemon cost a penny or two. A woman in Missouri could walk to the general store and come home with everything she needed for a full pie for less than a dime. Clara Canucciari, who became famous in her 90s for cooking Depression-era meals on camera, talked about this pie as one of the secrets her generation carried. Nobody at that kitchen table ever complained. The crust browned, the filling bubbled, and the house smelled like fall. In 1935, putting something on the table that tasted like abundance was its own quiet act of defiance. Number 18. Tomato soup from ketchup and hot water. This one sounds like a joke, but families really did it. You squeezed ketchup into a pot, added hot water, stirred it together, and heated it through. If you had a little butter or milk, you added that too. What you got was a thin, sweet, slightly tangy tomato soup that tasted close enough when there was nothing else in the pantry. Campbell's canned tomato soup cost about a dime during the Depression, and for some families that was a dime they did not have. Ketchup lasted longer, cost less per serving, and was already sitting on the shelf. It was not elegant. It was not something you bragged about, but it was hot, it was red, and on a cold night it filled the gap between supper and sleep. Number 17. Cornmeal mush, fried the next morning. You boiled cornmeal in salted water until it thickened into a soft porridge. That night you ate it hot, maybe with a little molasses poured over the top. But the real trick came the next day. You poured the leftover mush into a loaf pan, let it set up overnight, then sliced it thick and fried it in bacon grease until both sides were golden and crisp. One batch of cornmeal gave you 2 completely different meals. The porridge was supper. The fried slices were breakfast. In Kentucky and Tennessee, fried mush was served alongside eggs and sausage when the family could afford those things, and alone when they could not. Either way, It held you until lunch. Number 16. Growing your own yeast from potato water. Before you could buy a packet of yeast at the store, a lot of families made their own. You took the water left over from boiling potatoes, added a spoonful of sugar and a little flour, and left it in a warm spot near the stove. Within a day or two, wild yeast from the air colonized the mixture, and it started to bubble. You fed it flour and sugar every day, and it kept going for weeks. Every time you needed to bake, you scooped some out and used it the same as store-bought yeast. This was common across rural America before the Depression, but the hard times made it essential again for families who could not justify spending money on something they could grow for free on the counter. The bread it made had a sour tang that no commercial yeast could replicate. Number 15. Stretching ground meat with oatmeal and breadcrumbs. When a pound of hamburger had to feed a family of 5, you stretched it. You mixed in oatmeal, stale breadcrumbs, a diced onion, and enough water or milk to hold it together. Then you shaped it into patties or packed it into a loaf pan. The oatmeal absorbed the fat and juices, so instead of losing volume in the pan, the meat held its shape and stayed moist. What came out went twice as far as straight meat, and most people at the table never noticed. Butchers in the 1930s knew exactly what was happening when a housewife asked for the cheapest ground beef in the case. Nobody judged it. Everybody was doing the same thing. This trick never actually disappeared. The church supper meatloaf your grandmother brought in the 1970s was still 1/3 oatmeal. She just stopped mentioning it. There is something about cooking for yourself that people underestimate. During the Depression, a woman who could turn almost nothing into something hot at the stove was not just feeding her family. She was holding the whole thing together. The meal was proof that the day had a purpose. The clean plate was proof that somebody cared enough to stand over a hot stove in July and make sure nobody went to bed hungry. We talk about the Depression in terms of banks and breadlines, but the real front line was the kitchen. That is where the war was fought every single day. 3 meals a day by women whose names never made it into a history book. They won that war. And the proof is that their children and grandchildren are still here, still remembering what those kitchens smelled like. Number 14. The perpetual pot. This might have fed more families through the Depression than any other single practice on this list. The idea was simple. You kept a large pot on the back of the stove, and it never went completely empty. Whatever you had went into it. Potato peels, onion ends, a ham bone, leftover beans, the tough ends of carrots, a handful of barley or rice. Every day you added water, and whatever scraps the kitchen produced, brought it back up to a simmer and ladled out bowls for whoever was hungry. The soup changed flavor every day. Monday, it tasted like potato. By Wednesday, it was more like bean. By Friday, if someone brought by a chicken carcass, it turned almost rich. The constant heat kept it safe. Families in Appalachia and across the rural South kept a perpetual pot going from the first cold snap in October until the heat broke the following spring. Some claimed their pot went the whole winter without ever being emptied or washed. The broth that settled at the bottom after weeks of bones and scraps and slow simmering was darker than coffee and more nourishing than anything you could buy at a drugstore counter. It was the original bone broth, decades before anyone slapped that word on a label in a health food store. A woman in eastern Kentucky could feed her whole family from that pot on any given day, and the total cost of everything inside it was less than the price of a single restaurant meal. She did not need a recipe. She needed a stove and the will to keep the fire going. Number 13. Wacky cake. This was chocolate cake made without eggs, butter, or milk. You mixed flour, sugar, cocoa powder, baking soda, salt, vinegar, vanilla, vegetable oil, and water directly in the baking pan. No mixing bowl, no beater. You poked 3 wells in the dry ingredients, poured the wet ones in, stirred with a fork, and slid it straight into the oven. The vinegar and baking soda reacted to create the rise that eggs normally provided. The result was a moist, dark, slightly dense chocolate cake that cost almost nothing. During the Depression, eggs and butter were often the first things a family ran out of. Wacky cake meant you could still put a birthday cake on the table without the expensive ingredients. It showed up in community cookbooks across the Midwest in the 1930s, and versions of it are still baked today. Number 12. Lard crust for everything. Before vegetable shortening and butter took over the American pie, the standard crust in most kitchens was made with lard, rendered pig fat, flour, salt, and a splash of ice water. That was it. Lard produced a crust that was flakier and more tender than anything butter could make, because it has a higher melting point and creates bigger steam pockets as the dough bakes. During the Depression, lard was cheap and available everywhere. Most rural families rendered their own from pork fat after butchering season. A single hog could produce enough lard to last a family through months of pies, biscuits, and fried cornbread. The crust it made shattered when you pressed a fork through it and practically dissolved on the tongue. Crisco pushed lard off the shelf by the 1950s, but plenty of grandmothers never switched. Number 11. Stretching one egg across an entire batch. Eggs were not always available, and when they were, you did not waste them. If a biscuit recipe called for 2, you used 1. If a cake needed 3, you used 1 and added a splash of vinegar or a little extra baking powder to make up the difference. Some women beat a single egg with water to double its volume before folding it into the batter. Others saved the egg for the top glaze and left the dough without one entirely. In parts of the South, it was common to go weeks with only a few eggs from the family hens, and everyone had to stretch as far as it could. Nobody threw away a yolk. Nobody wasted a white. The shells got crushed and added to the garden soil. Number 10. Getting tall, tender biscuits out of almost nothing. Flour, lard, and buttermilk. Some added a pinch of soda or salt, but the basic recipe was just those 3 things. You cut the lard into the flour, poured in enough buttermilk to bring it together, patted it out, and baked the rounds in a hot oven. Here was the secret. The acidity in the buttermilk reacted with the soda to give the biscuits their rise, and the buttermilk itself was free for families that kept a cow because it was the liquid left after churning butter. 2 things from 1 bucket of milk. What came out was tall, tender, golden on top, with layers you could pull apart with your hands. These biscuits stretched every meal further. They went with soup, with gravy, with jam, with nothing at all. A plate of warm biscuits on the table made any dinner feel like enough. Somewhere along the way, the food industry convinced us that cooking from scratch was too complicated, that we needed mixes and cans and frozen trays to get dinner on the table. But the women who lived through the Depression never believed it. They knew a biscuit took 5 minutes. They knew a pot of beans cost less than a single can of whatever the grocery store was selling. They knew that gravy was just drippings and flour and a steady hand. The industry did not replace their knowledge because it was inferior. It replaced their knowledge because selling you something was more profitable than letting you make it yourself. These secrets did not just fade away on their own. They were quietly pushed aside. Number 9. Nursing the sick and the elderly on nothing but warm milk and toast. This was the trick you reached for when someone was ill, when the baby needed something soft, or when there was genuinely nothing else in the house. Folks called it milk toast. You toasted a slice of bread, put it in a bowl, poured warm milk over it, and added a little butter and a pinch of sugar or salt. The secret was how much comfort came out of so little. It was bland, gentle, and easy to swallow. Doctors in the 1930s actually recommended it for recovering patients because it sat easy on the stomach and kept something warm in the body. Nobody bragged about making it, but for elderly people living alone during the Depression, this was sometimes the only meal of the day. It asked almost nothing of you. A pot, a piece of bread, some milk. Simple enough to make with shaking hands and warm enough to feel like someone still cared. Number 8. Bean soup from a ham bone that had already fed 10 people. After a ham was carved for Sunday dinner and every slice picked clean, the bone went into a pot with dried beans, an onion, whatever vegetables were around, salt, and pepper. You simmered it for hours until the marrow dissolved and the last traces of meat cooked out into the broth. By evening, you had a thick, smoky soup that could feed the family for 2 or 3 more days. The ham was the first meal. The soup was the second, third, and fourth. In the South, buying a ham was never about one dinner. It was about the whole week. The bone was the most valuable part, and the person doing the cooking knew it. Number 7. Peanut butter on absolutely anything. When there was no meat and no money to buy any, peanut butter became the protein. You spread it on bread, on crackers, on celery if you had it, straight on a spoon if you did not. Peanut butter was cheap, it lasted without refrigeration, and a jar went a long way. During the Depression, brands like Skippy and Peter Pan were selling it for around 10 cents a jar. City families relied on it more than rural ones because city households did not have chickens or hogs to fall back on. A child in Detroit might eat peanut butter on stale bread every day for a week. It was not variety, it was fuel. And the body does not care about variety when it needs to keep going. Number 6. Canning everything that grew. When the garden came in heavy or the local orchards had surplus, you canned everything you could get your hands on. Tomatoes, green beans, peaches, corn, pickles, jams, applesauce. You stood over a hot stove in August, sterilizing jars, boiling lids, and filling your pantry shelf by shelf. The goal was simple: have enough jars in the cellar to make it through the entire winter without spending money on produce. Families that canned well could go months without buying a single vegetable. In rural communities across the Midwest and the South, canning was competitive. Neighbors compared pantries the way people today compare cars. A well-stocked shelf meant you had planned ahead and worked harder. The ball mason jar was the most important kitchen tool in Depression-era America, more important than the stove itself, because the stove cooked tonight's dinner but the jars guaranteed next month's. Number 5. Bacon grease as the only cooking fat in the house. Every kitchen had a tin or a jar next to the stove, and it was full of saved bacon grease. Nothing was cooked in butter or oil. Eggs, cornbread, potatoes, greens, biscuits, beans. Everything went into that fat. When the jar got low, you cooked more bacon and poured the fresh drippings right on top of the old. Some families kept the same jar going for months, straining out the bits as they went. The flavor it gave everything was smoky and rich, and it made plain food taste like something worth sitting down for. Bacon grease was not a preference. It was the only option, because buying a bottle of cooking oil meant taking money away from flour or sugar. Today, people cook with animal fats again and call it a health trend. Your grandmother would laugh at that. She never stopped. Number 4. Vinegar pie. When there were no apples, no berries, and no fruit of any kind in the house, there was vinegar. Somebody figured out generations before the Depression that you could bake a pie from it. You mixed vinegar, sugar, butter, eggs, and a little flour, poured it into a crust, and baked it. The result was tart, custardy, almost like a chess pie with a sharper edge. It was not trying to be fruit pie. It was its own thing. Vinegar pie appeared in handwritten recipe collections across the South and the Midwest long before the 1930s. But the hard times brought it back for families with nothing sweet in the pantry except a bottle of vinegar and some sugar. It proved that dessert did not require abundance. It just required knowing what to do with what you had. Number 3. Mock cream from milk, flour, and a little butter. Real cream was expensive or flat out unavailable for most Depression-era families, so they made their own version. You melted a tablespoon of butter in a pan, whisked in a tablespoon of flour until it was smooth, then slowly stirred in milk over low heat until it thickened into something that looked and poured like cream. It went on bread pudding, over canned fruit, into coffee, and across hot biscuits, and nobody at the table complained. Some versions left out the butter entirely and used nothing but flour and milk heated slow. The result was not real cream, but it did the job. Mock cream was one of dozens of Depression-era substitutes that taught people a lesson the food industry would rather you never learned. Most of what you buy at the store, you can make at home for almost nothing if you know how. Number 2. The clean plate habit, where nothing was ever wasted. This was not a recipe. It was a way of running a kitchen. Potato peels went into soup. Stale bread became pudding or breadcrumbs. Bones went into broth. vegetable scraps became stock. Apple peels turned to vinegar. Bacon fat filled the grease jar. Coffee grounds fed the garden. Eggshells got crushed for the compost. There was no garbage in a Depression-era kitchen because nothing was garbage. Every scrap had a second purpose, and the cook knew exactly what it was. The families that survived best were not the ones who earned the most. They were the ones who wasted the least. Multiply that difference by 3 meals a day for 10 years, and you see the real math. The women who ran those kitchens could stretch $1 into a week, not by magic, but by discipline. They refused to throw anything away. Number 1. Simmering every last bone into broth. The secret that held everything on this list together. Every bone that came through the kitchen went into a pot of water. Chicken, pork, beef when you were lucky. You simmered them for hours, sometimes overnight, until the marrow dissolved and the collagen broke down into a thick, golden liquid that set up like jelly when it cooled. That broth was the foundation of almost everything else. It was the base of the perpetual pot, the liquid that stretched the soup. The thing you sipped when you were sick and could not keep anything else down. This was not a trend during the Depression. It was a survival tool. A pot of bones and water could sustain a family for days when there was nothing else at all. The women who made it understood something that modern nutritional science has only recently caught up to. Slow-cooked bone broth is one of the most nourishing things a human being can consume. They did not know the word collagen. They did not need to. They knew that when you drank it, you felt stronger. That was enough. The cracklings from rendering day were the one thing that made children look forward to hog killing. Salted and warm from the wash pot, they were golden, impossibly crisp, pure pork compressed into small, crunchy bites. But the real magic came the next morning, when a double handful got folded into cornbread batter. Just meal, a little flour, salt, and lard to grease the skillet, and baked in cast iron so hot the edges sizzled on contact. What came out was crackling bread, dense and brown, with pockets of melted fat that dissolved against your tongue. Helen Hoggard of Bertie County, born in 1917, said it was the one dish that brought every child to the kitchen without being called twice. You can find cornmeal and you can find cracklings if you ask a butcher. The bread still will not taste the way hers did. Salt-cured country ham was Christmas luxury taking months to create and symbolizing prosperity through patience. These weren't store hams, but whole hog legs cured in salt, then hung in smokehouses through fall and winter. The curing began in November, with fresh hams rubbed with salt and sometimes sugar, drawing out moisture and preserving meat without refrigeration. By Christmas, hams developed deep mahogany exteriors and concentrated salty sweet flavor, unlike anything modern. The ham was soaked overnight to remove excess salt, then baked slowly with brown sugar glaze, creating caramelized crust. Sliced thin, the meat was intensely flavorful, salty, smoky, rich, requiring only biscuits and red-eye gravy. In Virginia, Kentucky, and Tennessee, country ham represented wealth and foresight, since families began curing in fall for Christmas. The smell of ham baking filled houses Christmas morning. This wasn't bought but made food, requiring knowledge of salt ratios and smoking. Smoke preservation in small wooden smokehouses transformed fresh meat into shelf-stable protein lasting through seasons without refrigeration, using nothing but hardwood smoke and time. Food scientists understand that smoking deposits phenolic compounds, organic acids, and carbonyl compounds inhibiting bacterial growth while creating antioxidant protection. The slow, cold smoking techniques mountain families used, hanging hams and bacon for weeks in cool smoke, created preservation conditions that food safety research confirms prevent pathogen development. The specific woods chosen, hickory, apple, oak, each contributed different antimicrobial compounds families discovered through generations of experience. Researchers now document that properly smoked meats remain safe for months at temperatures that would quickly spoil fresh meat. The smokehouses standing in every farmyard represented food security technology refined over centuries. Commercial processors now replicate these techniques but cannot fully match them. She peeled them in one long spiral, a skill learned by doing it 10,000 times, and sliced each apple thin enough to dry but thick enough to hold on the string. The slices were threaded on cotton and hung behind the wood stove, or spread on racks in the sun and brought inside at night. Dried right, those apples lasted all winter, rehydrated into fried slices sizzled in butter for breakfast, simmered into apple butter thick enough to stand a spoon in, or soaked for a Christmas stack cake. The peelings were never discarded. They were boiled into apple water, a mildly sweet drink, or reduced into thin vinegar for pickling. Every scrap found a second life. The women who dried them kept no timers and owned no thermometers. They knew a slice was ready by the way it bent between their fingers, leathery but not brittle. Venison backstrap with wild mushroom gravy was Christmas luxury harvested from November hunts and preserved for holiday feast. The backstrap was the tenderest deer cut, saved specifically for Christmas when families wanted something special. Hunters took their best bucks in late fall, field-dressed properly, and hung meat in cold sheds where December temperatures kept it fresh. The backstrap was sliced thick, seasoned with salt and pepper, then seared quickly in hot cast iron to keep inside pink and tender. Wild mushrooms gathered in fall and dried were reconstituted and cooked into rich gravy using pan drippings, creating earthy depth complementing venison. In mountain communities, venison Christmas meant rifle skill, understanding deer movement, and respect for animals giving lives to feed families. This wasn't bought meat, but earned through cold mornings in tree stands. The backstrap melted on tongue, flavor clean and sweet. Families served it with potatoes and beans. Water glass egg preservation allowed families to store eggs for months without refrigeration by submerging them in sodium silicate solution that sealed the porous shells completely. This technique, passed through generations of mountain women, kept eggs fresh from spring laying season through winter scarcity when hens stopped producing. Modern food scientists confirm that water glass creates an airtight barrier preventing bacterial contamination and moisture loss while maintaining quality for 6 months or longer. The eggs emerged from their mineral bath looking identical to fresh ones, with yolks standing high and whites holding firm. Commercial facilities now use similar principles, but the chemistry remains what farm wives discovered through necessity. Families practicing this technique never faced winter without eggs for baking or breakfast. The method required no refrigeration, no special equipment beyond a crock, and no ongoing attention. All that meat, all that lard, all those jars, none of it mattered without somewhere cold and dark to keep it. The root cellar was the mountain family's underground vault, dug 6 feet deep into a hillside where the temperature held steady year-round. Potatoes went in first, layered between thick beds of straw inside wooden bins, with a fodder shock of cornstalks built over the top to shed rain. Turnips and rutabagas were bedded the same way. Apples sat on separate shelves, never near the potatoes because the ripening gas would sprout them early. Every few weeks through winter, someone went down with a lantern to check for soft rot, to turn the potatoes, to pull anything going bad before it ruined the rest. A good cellar kept a family fed from November to April. A careless one cost half the winter stores to mold and mice. Children sent down to fetch potatoes in the dark remember the smell: cold earth, straw, and the faint sweetness of stored apples. Leather breeches with fatback brought summer's green beans to Christmas through ancient preservation. These weren't canned beans, but fresh beans strung on thread in late summer and hung from rafters. By Christmas, they hung brown, rattling when touched. The beans were soaked overnight, then cooked slowly with fatback until tender. The result tasted like concentrated summer with smoky richness. In Appalachian homes, leather breeches represented connection between seasons, August abundance preserved for December. Grandmothers taught granddaughters proper stringing, threading beans carefully for drying. The beans hung all fall, visible reminders of summer work feeding Christmas tables. Cooked long, they became tender with chewy texture unlike fresh beans. The pot liquor was rich, sopped with cornbread. This represented mountain resourcefulness, preserving without equipment, feeding families through winter using thread and time. Sorghum syrup production turned tall grass into sweetener when refined sugar was expensive or unavailable, providing calories, minerals, and flavor that sustained mountain communities. Nutritionists confirm that sorghum syrup contains iron, potassium, and antioxidants that refined sugar entirely lacks, making it nutritionally superior to the processed sweetener that replaced it. The process involved crushing stalks, collecting juice, and slowly cooking it over wood fires until it thickened into dark, richly flavored syrup. Scientists studying traditional sweeteners note that sorghum's complex flavor compounds reduce the quantity needed for sweetness compared to refined sugar. The crop itself grew in poor soil and dry conditions where other crops failed, providing reliable harvest when foods were scarce. Mountain families who drizzled sorghum over biscuits were consuming functional food before that term existed. Modern producers now market sorghum as artisanal sweetener. Hog killing day started before dawn and did not end until dark, and the centerpiece and the part that determined whether the family ate well for the next 12 months was rendering the lard. 2 cast-iron washpots sat over fires in the yard, and into them went every scrap of fat, cut small and stirred constantly for hours. The fire had to be wild cherry or hickory, kept low and steady. Let it blaze and the lard scorched, and scorched lard was a catastrophe with no replacement until next year's hog. The liquid fat was strained through cloth into 5-gallon tins. It went into biscuits, pie crusts, fried potatoes, and every pot of beans for the coming year. The cooked-down chunks left behind, cracklings, were salted and eaten warm by the kids standing around the fire. Nobody stood idle. Men butchered, women rendered, children stirred. The smoke followed you no matter which side of the pot you chose. Wild rabbit in brown gravy was the Christmas centerpiece mountain families harvested from snowy hillsides. These were wild cottontails tracked through December snow, caught in box traps or shot cleanly. The rabbits were skinned carefully, jointed, and browned slowly in pork fat until golden. They simmered for hours with wild onions and black pepper until meat fell off the bone. The cooking liquid became rich gravy thickened with flour. Families served this over biscuits or alongside stored potatoes. In eastern Kentucky and West Virginia, wild rabbit meant Christmas protein that cost nothing, just skill and land knowledge. Children learned holiday meals came from work, not stores. The meat was tender and mild, each piece representing winter mornings spent hunting. This represented self-reliance and connection between mountain people and their environment, proving Christmas abundance didn't require money when you had resourcefulness passed through generations. Lacto-fermentation in stoneware crocks was how mountain families preserved vegetables through long winters without refrigeration, using salt, water, and thyme to transform cabbage into sauerkraut and cucumbers into pickles. Scientists now understand this process cultivates beneficial bacteria, lactobacillus strains that modern probiotic supplements attempt to replicate. The fermentation creates lactic acid, preserving food naturally while producing vitamins and compounds supporting gut health. Research confirms that traditional fermented vegetables contain bacterial diversity commercial probiotics cannot match. Mountain families who ate sauerkraut with every winter meal, who drank pickle brine for stomach troubles, were practicing preventive medicine. The cool root cellars where crocks sat bubbling provided perfect fermentation temperatures that modern enthusiasts carefully monitor with thermometers. What seemed like primitive preservation was actually sophisticated biotechnology. Before ice boxes, before anyone in the hollow had heard the word Frigidaire, the spring house kept milk sweet and butter firm through the worst heat and the longest cold. A small stone or log shed built over a natural spring, it channeled cold water through shallow wooden troughs where crocks of buttermilk sat half submerged. Butter molds rested on wet stone shelves. In winter, the constant temperature of the spring, around 50 degrees year-round, kept everything from freezing when the outside air dropped below zero. Churning happened faster in there because the cool air helped fat solidify. You knew a family's spring house by its smell: clean water, cold stone, and the faint tang of fresh dairy. The women who tended these buildings understood humidity and airflow without ever naming those concepts. They knew when the water ran too fast or too slow by touching a crock. Most spring houses are gone now, collapsed behind an empty farmhouse, the spring still running underneath. Stack cake with dried apple filling was Christmas dessert requiring community cooperation and weeks of preparation. This wasn't ordinary cake, but thin layers stacked with dried apple filling, creating towering centerpiece feeding dozens. Women began drying apples in late summer, slicing thin and laying on screens until leathery. Come Christmas, apples were rehydrated and cooked with molasses and cinnamon until thick. The cake layers were simple: flour, lard, molasses, spices, rolled thin and baked separately. Assembly was ceremony, each layer placed and spread with apple mixture. The cake sat for days, letting flavors meld into something slicing clean and tasting like autumn. In mountain communities, stack cake represented cooperation because neighbors often brought layers to celebrations. The finished cake stood tall, dark layers visible through golden apple filling. This represented mountain Christmas, patient, cooperative, deeply satisfying. Cast iron cooking was dismissed for decades as old-fashioned compared to modern non-stick surfaces, yet scientists now confirm what mountain cooks always knew. These heavy skillets delivered something essential beyond heat. Research proves that acidic foods cooked in cast iron absorb significant dietary iron, sometimes increasing iron content by 20 times or more. Appalachian women who simmered tomatoes, apples, and vinegar-based dishes in seasoned skillets were unknowingly treating iron deficiency anemia that plagued isolated communities. The pans themselves became supplements, leaching bioavailable iron into every pot of greens and every slow-simmered stew. Modern doctors now recommend cast iron cooking for pregnant women and children at risk of anemia. The seasoning process, coating pans with rendered lard and baking until glass smooth, created natural non-stick surfaces without synthetic chemicals researchers now question. Those heavy black skillets passed from mother to daughter carried more than recipes. The mountain remedy was sassafras tea, brewed from roots that grew wild on nearly every Appalachian hillside. You dug them in late fall, scrubbed the bark clean, pounded the thick ones, and boiled them until the water turned a deep reddish brown and the kitchen smelled like root beer and warm wood. The Cherokee had used sassafras to cure scurvy in arriving European sailors. It was the first export from the New World, shipped before tobacco. Mountain families drank it as a spring tonic to thin the blood, and it was one of 3 ingredients in the original SSS tonic, along with spicebush and sweet birch, patented by a South Carolina judge in 1857. Kids drank it sweetened with sorghum. Old women took it straight. The saying went, "When the blood is too thick, there is nothing so fine as a sassafras stick." Most people have never tasted real sassafras outside a commercial root beer, and even that flavor is synthetic now. Possum roasted with sweet potatoes was Christmas dinner that filled mountain families with pride. These weren't desperate meals, but traditional feasts prepared with care. The possums were caught in late fall after feeding on persimmons and acorns, giving meat surprisingly sweet flavor. The cleaning was meticulous, with possums scrubbed thoroughly and parboiled to remove wild taste. Then they were stuffed with sweet potatoes, onions, and herbs before slow roasting in Dutch ovens. The sweet potatoes absorbed rich juices while skin turned crispy golden. In North Carolina, Tennessee, and Georgia hollows, Possum Christmas meant honoring traditions stretching back generations. Grandmothers taught daughters proper preparation, passing knowledge connecting families to ancestors. The meat was tender and slightly sweet. Served with cornbread and greens, this was mountain fine dining representing cultural identity stronger than judgment. Rendering lard at hog killing time was the process providing mountain families with cooking fat, skin moisturizer, soap ingredient, and medicinal base, all from portions modern processing discards. Scientists now recognize that properly rendered lard from pasture-raised pigs contains significant vitamin D, healthy monounsaturated fats similar to olive oil, and none of the trans fats in hydrogenated vegetable shortening. The rendering involved slowly cooking pork fat until it liquefied, then straining into crocks where it solidified into pure white cooking fat lasting months without refrigeration. Nutritionists who once condemned lard now acknowledge that traditional lard has a better fatty acid profile than many vegetable oils promoted as healthier. The cracklins left behind after rendering provided protein-rich snacks and additions to cornbread, stretching precious resources. Mountain cooks who saved every scrap of fat were practicing waste reduction that modern sustainability advocates now champion. Long before anyone had a working refrigerator in the mountains, families in Mitchell County, North Carolina, were pulling their cabbages in mid-October and flipping them upside down into freshly plowed furrows. They called it holing it up. Dig a row, set each head root side up, turn another furrow of dirt right over the top, and walk away. The frozen ground drew moisture out slowly, and those tough outer leaves became a natural wrapper that kept the inside crisp all winter. When the thaw came, you dug up a head that tasted fresher than anything from a jar. Your grandmother made slaw from it in the dead of January, and that impossible crunch, in a season of soft, mushy canned vegetables, was worth every bit of the October labor. The women who knew how deep to set those heads never wrote a word of it down. Fried rabbit sausage with buttermilk biscuits was Christmas breakfast that turned wild game into something special enough for holiday morning. Mountain families ground rabbit meat with pork fat, sage, black pepper, and salt, forming patties that fried crispy in cast iron. The sausage was lean from rabbit but rich from pork fat, creating perfect balance. Served alongside buttermilk biscuits, split and buttered, this was breakfast that required hunting skill and butchering knowledge. In Appalachian communities, Christmas morning meant rabbit sausage sizzling while biscuits baked, filling houses with savory smells. Children woke to this aroma, understanding Christmas began with food earned through work. The sausage was tender inside with crackling crust outside, its sage flavor marking it as celebration food. This represented mountain Christmas, wild game transformed into tradition, poverty turned into pride through skill and resourcefulness. Root cellar food storage represented centuries of accumulated knowledge about temperature, humidity, and air circulation that modern scientists now study with sophisticated instruments. Mountain families dug into hillsides, creating naturally climate-controlled spaces, maintaining temperatures between 32 and 40 degrees year-round. These underground chambers kept potatoes from sprouting, apples from softening, and root vegetables from desiccating through entire winters. Food preservation researchers now understand that consistent cool temperatures and high humidity slow respiration and prevent ethylene damage causing deterioration. The layering techniques, storing apples away from potatoes, wrapping vegetables in newspaper, layering carrots in damp sand, reflected understanding of food chemistry textbooks would later confirm. Families maintaining these cool caverns stored enough produce to survive months of isolation. Modern homesteaders now build root cellars using these principles. The only thing between your family and a 15-degree night was a few inches of mud packed between logs. Chinking was a fall chore as certain as hog killing. You mixed red clay with water, sometimes binding it with straw or animal hair, and pressed it into every gap the wind had widened since summer. Some folks used creek moss. Others swore by clay and wood ash that dried harder than mortar. The old women ran a hand along the wall and felt the draft before you ever saw the crack. Inside, the worst gaps got sealed with strips of newspaper pasted over with flour and water paste, or rags soaked in tallow. A well-chinked cabin held heat from one fireplace in a room large enough for 8. You learned the quality of the work on the first cold night, lying under quilts, listening for the whistle that meant someone missed a spot. Pickled pig's feet were Christmas delicacy, transforming butchering scraps into something prized. When families butchered hogs in December, nothing was wasted, especially feet becoming treats after preparation. The feet were cleaned meticulously, boiled tender with bay leaves and peppercorns, then packed into stone crocks and covered with spiced vinegar heated with garlic and pepper. They cured for weeks, vinegar penetrating meat and softening cartilage until everything became tender and tangy. Served cold on Christmas morning, pickled feet were eaten with fingers, meat falling off bones while gelatinous texture melted on tongues. In rural communities throughout the South, these represented thrift elevated to tradition. using every part of hog and creating something delicious. Children learned to appreciate pickled feet as treats, not scraps. The vinegary tang cut through rich holiday meals. This proved mountain cooking was about transforming everything into something worth celebrating. Haybox cooking was the ingenious method where mountain women would bring a pot to boil, then nestle it inside boxes stuffed with hay, quilts, or sawdust, and let residual heat finish cooking over hours without additional fuel. Scientists studying thermal retention now recognize this as remarkably efficient energy technology that modern slow cookers replicate with electricity. The insulation held temperatures in safe cooking range while allowing tough cuts and dried beans to tenderize slowly. Families who couldn't afford constant wood or coal used this method to produce stews, porridges, and braised meats requiring hours of cooking. Modern engineers study these principles for off-grid cooking solutions. The technique also prevented nutrient loss occurring with prolonged high-heat cooking, preserving vitamins that would otherwise break down. Contemporary chefs now use similar techniques under fancy names like passive cooking. Every October, before the first real cold snap settled into the hollows, someone had to bank the cabin. Banking meant shoveling dirt, mixed with clay if you could get it, up against the bottom logs, packing it halfway up the lowest course. That gap between the ground and the foundation log never sat flush, and wind cut through it all night long. Some households piled earth so many years running that the cabin looked half buried, like it was sinking into the mountain. Inside, the women recharged the chinking between every log, pushing fresh mud into cracks that had dried and crumbled since spring. You could hear the difference on a windy night. A well-banked cabin held warmth like a fist around the stove. A neglected one whistled. Old-timers said you could tell how a family was doing just by looking at the base of their house in November. Whole hog shoulder with crackling bread was Christmas feast requiring community effort, turning December butchering into celebration. Mountain families raised hogs specifically for Christmas slaughter, feeding them all year. The shoulder was large enough to feed extended family, fatty enough to stay moist during long cooking. It was seasoned with salt and pepper, then slow roasted over hickory coals in outdoor pits men tended throughout Christmas Eve night. Fat rendered slowly, creating crispy bark outside while inside stayed tender. Women saved cracklings, crispy rendered pork fat bits, to mix into cornbread batter. The crackling bread baked in cast iron skillets, top golden and crunchy. In rural Georgia, Arkansas, and Mississippi, this meant Christmas smelling like wood smoke for miles. Families gathered around outdoor fires, sharing whiskey and stories while meat cooked through cold night. The finished shoulder pulled apart easily, juice running into crackling bread. Bone broth simmering was the practice of cooking animal bones for hours or even days until the liquid turned rich, gelatinous, and deeply flavored with extracted nutrients. Scientists now confirm that this slow extraction releases collagen, gelatin, amino acids, and minerals, including calcium, magnesium, and phosphorus, in forms the body readily absorbs. Mountain women who kept stock pots simmering on wood stoves, adding scraps and bones throughout the week, were creating liquid nutrition that modern wellness companies now sell for premium prices. The gelatin supports joint health and gut lining integrity, while the amino acids glycine and proline promote skin health and immune function. Nothing was wasted. Chicken feet, pig knuckles, beef marrow bones all contributed their particular richness to the pot. Families who drank bone broth daily, used it as cooking liquid, and served it to the sick were practicing evidence-based nutrition without knowing the science. In the 1920s and 30s, white sugar was a luxury most mountain families saw only at Christmas, if then. What they had was sorghum, a tall cane grass that grew thick in the bottom fields and could be pressed, boiled, and reduced into a dark, heavy syrup for everything from biscuits to gingerbread to glazing a Christmas ham. The stalks were stripped by hand, fed through a mule-driven press, and the pale green juice collected in buckets. Then came hours of boiling in a long, shallow copper pan over wood fire, skimming green foam until the syrup turned thick and amber. African American families in the Appalachian coalfields built their own sorghum traditions, using it as a meat glaze, a baking ingredient, and a candy base. A good season filled enough jars to last October to June. The flavor was nothing like store-bought molasses. Warmer, grassier, with a slight bitterness that told you it came from the field and not a factory. Wild turkey roasted with chestnut dressing was Christmas dinner that required hunting success and forest knowledge. These weren't farm turkeys, but wild birds shot in December woods, their meat darker and more flavorful than domestic fowl. The turkey was stuffed with dressing made from dried cornbread, wild chestnuts gathered in fall, sage, and onions. Roasted slowly, the bird developed crispy skin while staying moist inside, the chestnut dressing absorbing juices and becoming rich and savory. In mountain communities, wild turkey represented Christmas success. The hunter who brought one home provided real celebration. The meat was lean and slightly gamey, requiring careful cooking to stay tender. Chestnuts added sweetness and texture impossible with modern ingredients. This was Christmas earned through December mornings in cold woods, through knowing turkey habits and shooting straight. The finished bird-fed extended family, its presence on the table marking genuine achievement. Nixtamalization was the ancient process of soaking dried corn in wood ash lye water that Appalachian families learned from Cherokee neighbors and practiced for generations. The process involved mixing hardwood ashes with water to create an alkaline solution, then soaking dried corn kernels until the tough outer hulls loosened and slipped away. What seemed like primitive folk cooking was actually sophisticated chemistry that modern nutritionists now celebrate. The lye treatment released niacin otherwise locked inside the corn, preventing pellagra, a devastating disease that plagued communities eating untreated cornmeal. The alkaline bath also increased calcium and improved protein quality by making amino acids more bioavailable. Mountain families who continued this practice never suffered the nutritional deficiencies striking populations eating refined corn. Scientists now study this exact process, calling it one of the most important food innovations in human history. Those grandmothers stirring ash water were performing biochemistry. You held the spool of heavy thread steady while she pushed a darning needle straight through each green bean pod, one after another, until the string hung 4 feet long with Kentucky half-runners. Leather breeches, she called them, or shuck beans, depending on which hollow you came from. The practice likely arrived with German settlers from the Palatinate, though Cherokee households had been drying beans on rawhide cord long before Europeans reached these mountains. Hung from the porch rafters or behind the wood stove, the pods shriveled until they looked like tiny pairs of worn-out trousers, brown and wrinkled. Come January, she soaked them overnight, dropped in a chunk of fatback, and simmered for hours. The taste was nothing like fresh beans, deeper, earthier, almost meaty. Some families tucked a dried hot pepper into the storage sack to keep insects out. You can buy the beans and try it yourself, but the flavor is never quite right without her hands on the thread. Fried squirrel with milk gravy turned small game into Christmas celebration, tasting like hickory nuts and mountain tradition. December, squirrels were fat from fall acorns, their meat firm and flavorful. Young boys went hunting Christmas Eve morning, fathers teaching them to shoot cleanly. The squirrels were cleaned, cut into pieces, then soaked overnight in salt water. On Christmas morning, they were dredged in seasoned flour and fried in hot lard until golden crispy. Pan drippings became milk gravy, flour stirred into hot fat, then milk added slowly until thickened creamy. Families served this over fresh-baked biscuits. In Appalachian communities, Squirrel Christmas meant teaching children to hunt, to provide. Understanding food came from work. The meat was tender and slightly nutty, each piece representing hours in cold December woods. Mothers fried batch after batch, keeping platters warm. This wasn't poverty food, but tradition connecting tables to land itself. Clabbered milk was the thick, tangy substance that formed when raw milk sat at room temperature until natural bacteria transformed it into something between yogurt and cheese. Scientists understand this spontaneous fermentation created probiotic-rich food containing beneficial bacteria that modern consumers pay premium prices to obtain. Mountain women who used clabbered milk in biscuits, cornbread, and batters were adding leavening, tenderness, and nutrition simultaneously. The lactic acid produced during clabbering created the acidic environment activating baking soda for rising, while fermentation partially digested lactose for those struggling with fresh milk. Food researchers confirm clabbered milk contained bacterial strains supporting digestive health and immune function. The process required no special equipment. Raw milk simply sat in a warm kitchen until it thickened naturally. Modern raw milk advocates now practice intentional clabbering, finally discovering what Appalachian grandmothers used for generations. Before store-bought milk reached the deep hollows, Cherokee families had already learned to pull richness from the forest floor. Hickory nuts fell in October, and their shells were brutal. Cracked with a hammer or the flat of an iron, the nut meats came out in tiny, stubborn fragments. But the real secret was not the meat. It was the shells. You crushed everything, meat, shell, all of it, dropped the pieces into boiling water, and simmered until a thin, milky liquid rose to the surface. Strained through cloth, it became hickory nut milk, rich enough to stir into cornbread batter or pour over hominy. The flavor was deeper than cow's milk, nuttier than cream. Mountain settlers adopted the method, and children earned pennies selling shelled nuts at the general store. But the ones who boiled the whole thing knew the real flavor lived in what everyone else threw away. Crackling cornbread with cane syrup was Christmas-side that elevated simple cornbread into something rich and celebratory. The cracklings, crispy bits of rendered pork fat left from lard making, were mixed into cornbread batter before baking, creating pockets of crunchy, porky richness throughout. The bread baked in cast iron until crusty outside and tender inside, its top golden and inviting. Served with dark cane syrup drizzled over warm slices, this combined savory and sweet in ways that defined mountain eating. In rural communities, crackling cornbread meant using every part of the hog, transforming scraps into celebration. The cracklings added protein and flavor that plain cornbread lacked, while cane syrup provided sweetness families couldn't always afford. This was Christmas abundance created from what others might discard, proving mountain cooks knew how to make luxury from nothing. Vinegar mother cultivation was how mountain families maintained continuous supplies of homemade vinegar using nothing but fruit scraps, water, and the mysterious living culture that transformed alcohol into acid. Scientists now understand this gelatinous mass as a symbiotic colony of acetic acid bacteria that modern fermentation enthusiasts cultivate intentionally. The process involved adding apple peels, cores, and bruised fruit to crocks of water, letting wild yeasts convert sugars to alcohol, then allowing the vinegar mother to transform that alcohol into acetic acid over weeks. The resulting vinegar contained enzymes, beneficial bacteria, and organic acids that commercial distilled vinegar lacks entirely. Mountain families use this living vinegar for preserving, cleaning, medicine, and cooking, passing down their mothers from generation to generation. Food scientists studying traditional vinegars now document health compounds that pasteurized commercial products destroy. That feel cannot be taught from a book. If dried apples kept the sweet side of winter alive, the salt-cured ham in the smokehouse held body and soul together. Curing began within hours of the kill, while the meat was still warm, and demanded a patience no modern kitchen knows. Hams and shoulders were rubbed with salt mixed with brown sugar and black pepper, then packed into barrels or laid on wooden shelves. The old-timers tested the brine by dissolving salt in water until a raw egg floated, and that told them the cure was strong enough. Helen Hoggart of Bertie County said the ham sat in salt for 21 days, no shortcuts. Then you washed it clean, rubbed it with molasses and pepper, and hung it by wire in the smokehouse. The wire kept the mice off. The pepper kept the flies away. You sliced from that ham all winter long, and every morning the kitchen smelled like nothing any store-bought country ham has ever matched. When winter dragged past bearing and the body felt heavy with months of salt pork and starchy roots, blackberry jam cake was Christmas dessert, carrying summer's wild harvest into winter celebration. This wasn't ordinary cake, but dense creation, darkened with blackberry jam stirred into batter. The jam came from wild berries picked along fence rows in July, cooked with sugar and preserved. Come Christmas, Jam transformed into cake moisture and flavor, tart, sweet, purple. The batter was spiced with cinnamon, cloves, and nutmeg, creating warmth, complementing berry brightness. Baked in cast iron, the cake emerged dark and fragrant, its crumb tight from jam. Some families added caramel icing, others served plain. In mountain communities, blackberry jam cake represented foresight and connection to land, picking berries in summer for Christmas months away. Children remembered helping pick berries, fingers stained purple. Understanding this work would become December dessert. The cake sliced thick, each piece carrying memories of summer foraging. This week, try one. Pick a secret from this list and make it in your own kitchen. Start with the simple ones: hot water cornbread, bread pudding, a pot of bean soup from a bone you were going to throw away. Then come back here and tell me which one you tried. I want to hear about it. If you are new here, hit subscribe, because I share more of these forgotten kitchen traditions every single week. Thank you for watching. I will see you in the next one.